There's a particular kind of person who moves through the world like a magnificent contradiction. They're vibrant, capable, magnetic. People are drawn to their energy, their depth, their seemingly effortless way of navigating complexity. But look closer and you'll notice something. They leave a trail of unfinished relationships and unmade decisions. Not because they're heartless or selfish. Often, they're the most sensitive people you'll meet. They crave connection with an intensity that surprises even them. Yet they hold an invisible emergency exit sign over every bond they form. The closer someone gets to what they truly want, the stronger the urge to run becomes. This isn't about fear of the other person, it's about fear of losing themselves. Fear of inevitable pain. Fear that commitment means surrendering the very freedom that keeps them safe. But here's the truth. Fear of commitment isn't a character flaw. It's a survival strategy that once made perfect sense. The foundation was laid early. Somewhere in their history, attachment became synonymous with threat. Not necessarily through dramatic trauma, but through the quiet accumulation of moments when closeness led to disappointment. When vulnerability was met with judgment, when love felt conditional on their ability to be someone they weren't, their young mind developed a simple equation. If I don't need you, you can't hurt me. Think of their heart as a magnificent ship that refuses to drop anchor. It mistakes constant movement for safety, believing that as long as it keeps sailing, it can't be destroyed by the rocks below. But what feels like freedom is actually a different kind of prison. They've confused independence with isolation. They're free from pain, yes, but they're also free from the transformative power of being truly known by another human being. Their inner critic operates like a sophisticated risk management system, constantly calculating the potential for disappointment against the possibility of joy. Every relationship becomes a cost-benefit analysis. Every moment of closeness triggers an internal alarm. This is getting dangerous. Time to reassess. They use their intelligence against themselves. That beautiful, analytical mind that serves them so well in other areas becomes a weapon of self-sabotage. They ruminate endlessly. This isn't it. There must be something better. What if I'm settling? What if I'm missing out on my real person? The rumination isn't really about finding flaws in their partner or their situation. It's about creating enough doubt to justify the familiar safety of distance. They live in a constant state of emotional regulation through avoidance. When feelings get too intense, when vulnerability starts to feel overwhelming, they don't lean in, they lean back. They create space. They find reasons why this particular connection isn't quite right. But here's the paradox. What feels like protection is actually a prison of their own making. They've become experts at keeping love at arm's length, not because they don't want it, but because they want it so desperately that the possibility of losing it feels unbearable. So they choose the controlled pain of loneliness over the unpredictable pain of heartbreak. Their nervous system has been trained to interpret safety as the most dangerous feeling of all. The moment they start to relax into connection, the moment they begin to trust that this might actually work, every alarm in their body starts ringing. They've learned to mistake the discomfort of growth for evidence that something is wrong. When relationships ask them to stretch, to compromise, to show up in ways that feel unfamiliar, they interpret that stretch as proof that they're in the wrong place with the wrong person. They've forgotten that love isn't a feeling you fall into and stay in effortlessly. It's a choice you make repeatedly, especially when it's difficult. But choice requires commitment, and commitment feels like a cage to someone whose survival has always depended on keeping their options open. Their heart knows what it wants, but their mind has convinced them that wanting is dangerous, that staying is surrender, that commitment is the end of who they are rather than the beginning of who they could become. They don't realize that the freedom they're protecting so fiercely is actually keeping them from the very experiences that would set them free. Watch how they operate when connection starts to feel too real. They become archaeologists of imperfection, excavating tiny flaws and polishing them until they gleam like evidence of incompatibility. The way she chews her food becomes unbearable. His laugh is too loud in restaurants. She texts too much, or not enough, or with the wrong tone. He leaves dishes in the sink. She's too close to her family or not close enough. Every quirk becomes a red flag, every difference a deal breaker. This isn't about being picky. This is about self-preservation disguised as discernment. They develop what we might call grass is greener syndrome. There's always someone more attractive at the coffee shop, someone more interesting in their DMs, someone more compatible just around the corner. The perfect person is perpetually one swipe away, one conversation away, one chance encounter away. But here's what they don't realize. They're not actually looking for someone better. They're looking for someone who won't ask them to grow, to change, to become vulnerable. They're searching for love that doesn't require them to show up fully. The emotional fade-out becomes their signature move. Not the dramatic exit, not the explosive fight, just a gradual retreat. They become busy, distracted, unavailable. Their responses get shorter. Their presence becomes half-hearted. They're physically there, but emotionally elsewhere. They perfect the art of being present while planning their escape. When vulnerability increases, they decrease. When their partner starts talking about the future, they start talking about space. When "I love you" hangs in the air, they find reasons to change the subject or leave the room. The closer they get to what they actually want, the more creative their avoidance becomes. They fear what psychologists call merger, the terrifying possibility that loving someone deeply means losing themselves completely. They imagine relationships like two streams converging, each losing its unique current in the process of becoming something shared. But they've misunderstood the nature of healthy intimacy. Real love doesn't erase you, it reveals you. It doesn't diminish your individuality. It creates space for it to flourish alongside someone else's. Their fear of merger is actually fear of being truly seen, because being seen means being known, and being known means being vulnerable to judgment, disappointment, rejection. It's safer to remain a beautiful mystery than to risk being an ordinary human being. They've learned to interpret the discomfort of intimacy as evidence of incompatibility. When relationships ask them to navigate conflict, to communicate through misunderstandings, to stay present during difficult conversations, they mistake that work for wrongness. They don't realize that every meaningful connection requires you to stretch beyond your comfort zone. That's not a bug in the system of love. That's the entire point. The paradox becomes most visible when they're closest to what they claim to want. The relationship is good, maybe even great. The person loves them, accepts them, sees their potential, and that's precisely when the urge to run becomes overwhelming. Safety for them is the most dangerous feeling of all. Their nervous system has been conditioned to interpret peace as the calm before the storm. When things are going well, they start scanning for problems. When their partner is happy, they start preparing for disappointment. When love feels secure, they start planning their exit strategy. They've forgotten that some discomfort comes not from being in the wrong place, but from being in the right place and having to grow into it. They've lost the ability to distinguish between the discomfort of growth and the discomfort of incompatibility. So they run, not always physically but emotionally. They create distance through criticism, through distraction, through the endless search for someone who will love them without asking them to be brave. But here's the truth they're avoiding. The courage required for commitment isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about becoming the person capable of choosing love, even when it's difficult, even when it asks you to grow, even when it requires you to stay present in your own discomfort. They keep searching for love that doesn't require courage, but that kind of love doesn't exist. The person who runs from commitment pays a price they rarely calculate. It's not just the relationships they've left behind or the opportunities they've declined. It's the slow erosion of their ability to be truly known by another human being. They live in a state of chronic superficiality, not by choice, but by necessity. When you can't let anyone get too close, when you're always keeping one foot out the door, you can never sink into the profound comfort of being completely yourself with another person. They're constantly performing, always managing impressions, always curating their presentation, always ready to be charming and engaging and just mysterious enough to maintain interest without revealing too much. It's exhausting to live on the edge of intimacy without ever crossing the threshold. The weight of unprocessed loss accumulates like sediment in their chest. Every almost relationship, every connection that could have been something more, every person they walked away from just as things were getting real. They carry these ghosts with them, a backpack full of what-ifs and might-have-beens. The lighter their commitments become, the heavier their emotional baggage grows. They tell themselves they're protecting their freedom, but what they're actually protecting is their right to remain unchanged. Every time they run from a relationship that asks them to grow, they're choosing familiarity over transformation. They're picking the known discomfort of loneliness over the unknown discomfort of becoming more than they currently are. This is the hidden tragedy of commitment avoidance. It's not just about avoiding heartbreak. It's about avoiding the kind of love that polishes you, that challenges you, that reveals parts of yourself you never knew existed. They're not just running from pain. They're running from the possibility of becoming their fullest self. Real intimacy is friction. It's two people rubbing against each other's edges until they both become smoother, kinder, more patient, more generous. But friction requires staying in place long enough for the polishing to happen. It requires choosing to work through the discomfort rather than around it. They've convinced themselves that the right person won't require any work, any compromise, any growth. That real love should feel easy from beginning to end. But they've confused ease with compatibility. True compatibility isn't the absence of friction. It's the willingness to navigate friction together. They watch other people in long-term relationships and see only the constraints, the compromises, the negotiations, the mundane reality of choosing the same person through different seasons of life. They don't see the profound intimacy that develops when two people decide to weather storms together rather than running to separate shelters. They don't see the safety that comes from being known completely and loved anyway. The relief of not having to perform, not having to be perfect, not having to earn love through constant entertainment or achievement. They don't see how commitment can actually be the ultimate freedom, the freedom to be imperfect, to have bad days, to grow and change without fear of abandonment. Their pattern of running has taught them that love is conditional on their ability to remain appealing, interesting, low maintenance. They've never experienced the transformative power of unconditional presence, of someone choosing to stay not because you're perfect, but because they're committed to the process of loving you through imperfection. The most heartbreaking cost is what happens to their capacity for trust. Not just trust in others, but trust in themselves. Every time they run, they reinforce the belief that they can't handle the complexity of real love, that they're not strong enough, brave enough, or worthy enough to stay and do the work. They begin to see themselves as fundamentally incapable of commitment, not because they don't want it, but because they've never stayed long enough to develop the muscles required for it. Like someone who's never learned to swim, convincing themselves they're not a water person. But here's what they don't realize. Commitment isn't a personality trait you're born with or without. It's a skill you develop through practice. And every time they run, they're practicing the wrong thing. The healing doesn't begin with finding the perfect person. It begins with the radical decision to practice staying. Not forever, not with the wrong person, but long enough to discover that discomfort doesn't always mean danger. Think of commitment not as a cage, but as an anchor. A ship with an anchor can weather storms that would destroy a vessel drifting freely. The anchor doesn't limit the ship's potential. It creates the stability necessary for the ship to survive and thrive in rough waters. Start with micro commitments, small promises to yourself and others that you can practice keeping. Commit to calling when you say you will. Commit to showing up for plans instead of canceling at the last minute. Commit to having difficult conversations instead of disappearing when things get uncomfortable. These aren't grand romantic gestures. They're training wheels for your nervous system. They teach you that staying doesn't mean losing yourself. That commitment can coexist with autonomy. Practice emotional regulation through presence rather than distance. When anxiety rises, when the urge to run kicks in, instead of creating physical space, create internal space, breathe. Notice the sensations in your body. Remind yourself that discomfort is information, not instruction. The urge to flee isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's just fear wearing the mask of intuition. Learn to trust the we without losing the I. Healthy commitment isn't about merger. It's about two whole people choosing to build something together while maintaining their individual integrity. Boundaries aren't walls that keep love out. They're the container that keeps love safe. True freedom isn't the ability to run from everything difficult. It's the ability to choose your commitments consciously and then honor them courageously. It's discovering that the cage you feared was actually the key to a kind of intimacy you never knew was possible. The greatest commitment you can make isn't to another person, it's to your own capacity for love, for growth, for staying present in the beautiful, messy, transformative work of letting someone know you completely. Your fear of commitment doesn't make you selfish or broken, it makes you human. It speaks to the depth of your sensitivity, your awareness of how much love can cost, your respect for the sacred nature of true intimacy. The world needs careful hearts like yours, hearts that don't give themselves away carelessly, that understand the weight of promises, that take connections seriously enough to be afraid of it. But the greatest courage isn't in protecting yourself from love, it's in choosing to stay, to be seen, to trust that you're strong enough to handle whatever comes from being fully known. The commitment you fear losing isn't to someone else, it's to yourself. And that commitment, once made, can never be broken.